And welcome back everyone to my recap from the FIDE World Cup of the second round, the second match. Yesterday I made a draw with the black pieces after a very long suffering against my opponent Yangyi. And today the same basically repeated itself. He surprised me in the opening, and after that I was sort of on the defense for the whole game, but I managed to save a draw in the very end, which means that we are heading to tiebreaks tomorrow. We're gonna talk about that in the end of the video, but first I would say we should have a quick look at what happened in the game. I went e4 again in this game, like I did against Lupulescu. He played e5, which was sort of expected. Knight f3, and here he played knight c6, which obviously I prepared for, but he is mostly a Petrov player, as many of the Chinese are. I guess that his strategy was that even from the black side, he wants to keep some chances, because in the tiebreaks, many things can happen, like with 15 minutes plus 10 seconds. Even this rating gap is not so relevant, because there's simply so little time that anyone can kind of blunder anything. That's why I guess he had the strategy to play something where I cannot immediately force a draw. Obviously, I wouldn't have done that anyway, but I would have really liked to have some very safe position where I can just press a little bit. Which, yeah, anyway, I could have gotten most likely in the game as well. He went for the marshal, so short castle, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, and after short castle here, I went for the anti-marshal with a4. c3 does allow the marshal gambit with d5, which, yeah, I did not really want to enter for this game today. So I went for the line with a4, which I've also played in the past already. I had a couple of games here, and Yangyi went for the move b4 in our game today. Other alternatives are bishop b7 and rook b8, which I both already faced over the board from the white side as well. And after b4 here, I spent some time, which, yeah, is not such a great decision, of course, in the long run, but I was mostly deciding which line to play, because I did not prepare the marshal specifically for this game, but I had a couple of ideas which I could go for, and I was sort of thinking which of them I remember most of. In the end, I went for d4 simply out of simplicity, because the positions tend to be very symmetrical, and as I said, I wanted to play it safe. But it was probably the line where I didn't know, where I knew the least from all of the possibilities. He went d6, that's the main move. Black should not take here on d4, because then his queen side is going to be weak, and I think white should go e5, and then this pawn is going to drop off as well, and black has a very bad position. So d6, now d takes e5, that's the main move, and he went d takes e5 rather quickly, which, yeah, is one of the possible moves, but knight takes e5 nowadays I think is the more established move. And the funny thing is that today actually Nepo had this exact line from the white side against Indian Grandmaster Dipta Ghosh, and he very surprisingly lost with the white pieces, which means that Nepo is knocked out of the World Cup if I checked correctly, because I think he made a draw yesterday. So that's a huge upset. And the cool thing was that, well, not for Nepo, but in that game, Nepo missed some sort of trick there. Actually, I think it's not a bad idea to go to that game, just to show what happened there, because the same motive also I thought about in the game as well. So that was Nepo's game, d takes e5. D takes e5, he took knight takes e5, and this position was reached. And yeah, here he played h3, which I don't know if it was a mix-up, and I'm 100% sure that here he was banking on bishop c4 here. But the thing is that it doesn't work because of bishop takes f2. And if king takes f2, queen c5 with a double attack, queen c5, if I can do it, queen c5 check, and white regains the piece, being just a pawn up. So Nepo had to go back with the queen, and after that he was already in a very bad position, and later on lost the game. But let's go back to my game. That was the end. We'll get to that in a second. So Yangyi took with a pawn, which I guess is more of a fighting option to keep more pieces on the board. I went knight d2. Here my knowledge, theoretical knowledge, more or less ended. Of course, I knew some of the typical ideas in the position, but yeah, I knew that d takes e5 is, objectively speaking, maybe a little bit less precise than taking with the knight, but it's also a fully playable line for black. So bishop c5. I could also trade queens, but I did not want to play just completely for a draw in this game, because when you do that, typically bad things tend to happen. So I tried to just play principle, knight d2, bishop c5, queen to e2. Why is this board so messed up here? Queen e2, yeah, queen e2, he went h6. h3 just stopping any knight g4, but the problem of h3 is that it does weaken the g3 square, especially after knight h5. Sometimes he has ideas with knight g3. In hindsight, maybe I don't need to do that, but I was always a bit worried about knight g4 appearing. Maybe I could start with a5, that might be another idea. Also wanted to cut out bishop g4, even though that is probably never really an idea, because typically after bishop g4 I'm very happy to go c3, when then his bishop on g4 is not really doing anything and I'm just stopping knight d4. But I went h3, he played queen e7, I played a5, rook d8, and yeah, here I made this move c3, which is of course a little bit weakening, but I just wanted to stop knight d4, and I thought to remember that, well, if I get something like this with bishop c4 and knight b3, covering the d4 square, then I will have quite a nice positional bind, but I simply don't think that I'm in time here. He played bishop e6. What I should have done instead was to start with bishop c4, which was actually my idea at first. But what bothered me was knight d4, even though I would have had a much safer position now than I had in the game. Now I would need to take, and this is what I was looking at, knight b3, maybe there are also other options. And now I was looking at c5, which is very risky because at some point I could have ideas to trap the bishop. But I didn't see how to make it work, and if black is in time for bishop e6 and then manages to push c4, then I could be in some trouble, I thought. Rook b1, bishop e6. Now if I take on a6, I thought that this position would be quite promising for black, because the bishop on d4 is just a monster. Maybe I'm also not in such a big trouble here, but it certainly didn't look very appealing. So I was looking at bishop d2 here, bishop takes e4, queen takes e4, queen e6. Queen takes e6 takes, and now the problem was that after c3 he has some ideas with c4. Maybe that anyway works, but I was worried about this, but now I see that he has double pawns. I think that I completely forgot about that in my calculation, so therefore I guess I should not be too much in any trouble here. It should be a draw, like from my own feeling now, just, yeah, it's 0.2. Just checked. So yeah, let me have a look at this line. Bishop c4 is a better move. There is also knight h5, which is the best move according to the computer. But here, well, firstly, bishop d5 was an option which I thought about, but knight f1 seemed quite simple to me. And, well, computer comes up with rook d6. And it's very unclear because he has attacking ideas with rook g6. So chances for both sides. Bishop d5, knight f4, queen c4 is another idea which I think I had a look at. But it is also very, very, very messy. Black has some options, like, again, rook d6 works for some reason. I guess after queen c5 there's going to be some sacrifice. Knight takes g2, yeah. King takes g2, there's rook g6, and black wins the queen. Yeah, bishop c4 would have been better for sure. I also don't have to go a5. The thing is, with a5, as it happened in the endgame, in the game, it can become a very serious weakness later, but I'm banking on this a6 pawn that it could become weak. And if I get all of these moves, bishop c4, c3, knight b3, then black could have some trouble with this a6 pawn in the long run. But it might be more flexible maybe to start with bishop c4. The only thing was, which I didn't want to allow, was for him either to go a5 or also knight a5. So that's why I started with a5 myself. Now I'm also seeing that bishop d5 is an option here. Well, there are generally quite a few possibilities in this position. I did not really see how it continues here. It's also equal. knight f3, and then probably I'll take on d4 at some moment, and it's going to be opposite color bishops. Anyway, in the game, yeah, this c3 move was, in hindsight, pretty poor. He went bishop e6. And now I was also quite upset that I went bishop c2, even though it looks like this might even be the best move. I thought that bishop c4 afterwards might be just a better move, but it's also not entirely clear. Because probably I'm never really even threatening to take here, because there are always so many threats on the king side. What is the computer giving? B takes c3, B takes c3, and he even takes on c4. I mean, here my evaluation was just incorrect, it seems. But because I thought I will get knight b3, then after bishop a7, bishop e3, I'll exchange the bishops and then put my knight to c5. But black has a very strong move, which I just missed here, rook d to b8. And now after knight b3, there's rook b5. Then I'm in trouble because he has established this rook on b5. That's kind of what black is hoping for in this line. So it was actually not so clear. I mean, I could also take on e6 immediately. My idea after bishop c4 was that if he goes knight h5, then I wanted to take and then go queen c4. And I thought that here the knight on h5 might be a little bit misplaced. It's also not clear because sometimes he could have ideas with knight f4. But I also did not really like this position so much. I mean, it's probably a better version than what happened in the game, but still it did not look so great for me. Generally, those endgames, if my pawn is on a5 and I don't have the light squared bishop anymore, back is typically quite comfortable. It seems like this might be the least evil, to take and go queen c4, but yeah, it also leads to something quite similar when black is just very, very comfortable in this endgame. So I went bishop c2 with the idea to go bishop d3. He took and went knight h5, which was a good move. Knight f1, queen f6. So unfortunately my lighting here just went out of power, so I need to continue recording like this. I hope the lighting is not too bad. Still, I haven't found a solution to the flickering. Let me know in the comment section down below if you have some ideas on how to fix that. Anyway, I went bishop d3 with the idea to hit the pawn on a6, but I missed his reply knight e7. And after that I can anyway not take on a6, because if I would take, he would have ideas with bishop takes h3. I think this would just be pretty bad for me immediately. He can also just, I think, leave the bishop here and play knight g6, knight f4. It generally looks incredibly dangerous at this point for me. Knight e7 was a very strong move by my opponent. So instead of bishop d3, I was considering to go bishop e3 here as well, but I'm also simply not in time here because his attack is coming like way too quickly. The best might be king h2 here to prepare to go g3, but still black is very comfortable in all of those positions. He could even go knight f4, I guess, and get the bishop here. And if someone is better, it's certainly black here as well. So I went bishop c4, knight g6, and now I started to defend pretty well, I think. I took on e6 and went queen a2, which of course is extremely ugly to play like that, going into an inferior endgame. But like, if I don't do that, I think I'm just gonna get checkmated. If he gets knight f4 and queen g6, I cannot stop all these threats. Also knight e3 is gonna be there, so I need to simplify. And he also doesn't really have a great way not to exchange now, because if he goes queen f6, then my queen gets active on c4. I thought bishop a7 and then maybe bishop e3. And yeah, I think I wouldn't be in too much danger here anymore. So he went to the endgame, went rook d3. I went rook c2, also an ugly move, but I have to defend the pawn somehow. Rook b8, and now bishop e3. He played rook b5, which I think was logical, defending the bishop on c5 and going after my weak pawn on a5 as well. Rook a1, another very passive move, but a move which I have to play to defend the pawn on a5. Now my threat is actually to go for c4 here. Like, if he goes something like knight f6, I can go c4. And then if he moves the rook, then I can take on c5. So he took immediately knight takes e3, knight h f4, Now king f1, I could have played that very quickly. The thing is, I at first completely didn't see that he has the threat rook takes e3. Like for a moment I wanted to play h4 to prepare g3, but then I saw thankfully that he can just grab my pawn and play knight e2, and yeah, this is something I don't want to allow. So I went king f1, which anyway is useful because I can I should activate my king in the endgame. Rook b3, going after the pawn on c3, and then knight d1, which I guess was another pretty important defensive move. Even though it seems like I already have a couple of ways to defend. Rook ac1 even is possible. I didn't see what I can play after rook a3. Ah, just knight c4 is there. And if rook a4, then I have knight b2, forking both rooks. Yeah, but with knight d1, again, it's a bit passive, but I thought just to defend this pawn somehow makes sense. I was also looking at ways to sacrifice the pawn, but then with low time it could become very concrete. Like, for example, I was looking at h4. If he takes, then g3. And yeah, it seems like I might be just in time, but I preferred to keep the material balance equal here with knight d1. I actually had to calculate here this move rook a3. Which is pretty cool, but I thought that it does not fully work because I can take here rook takes d1 and then knight to e1, and if knight d3 then I have rook e2 I thought, but king e2 is even stronger. I missed that move because now both are attacked, and if rook e1 king d3 I'm just an exchange up. And if he takes knight g2, I mean, I will never be worse because I'm an exchange up. So you won't believe it, but first the light stops working and then the sound stops working. I'm recording this now, this part of the video, for the second time. I just reviewed the footage, and from here on there was simply no sound. So I will go through the rest hopefully more quickly because I still need to go to dinner. I think we were just talking about the line with rook a3, so that simply does not really work here. My opponent went f6 instead to protect the pawn on e5 and being able to centralize his king soon. And I went rook d2 just to exchange this active rook on d3. Rook b8, rook takes d3, knight takes d3, now g3, and knight e7. At this point I was actually a little bit worried about knight c5. And after knight d2, rook d8, because king e2 does not work because of rook d2. Actually, that also might go on for a while because the knight is trapped, but at the very least, I guess he's winning the pawn, even though maybe I have knight e3. Knight c6, knight c4, and then I can take the knight on a1 on the next move. I don't know if any of this was even correct. Can I do this? Very strange line. Yeah, so this obviously doesn't work because I'm losing the pawn, but knight e3. Why is this endgame so bad for white? Is black running with the king? To the king side, I guess, yeah. King g6 and some quick f5. Yeah, this could be quite close. King e4, king f3, or king d5. We would need to check that on a bigger depth to see if it's holding. It's now giving me minus 0.5, so should be holding, but it won't be fun now. Anyway, then I saw that I will have the move rook a2 here. And he is winning a pawn, but I'll just show you the line which I was looking at. Knight takes e4, knight takes e4, rook d1, king e2, rook d5, c4, rook d4, knight c5, rook d6, knight b7, rook c6, c5. This is what I was thinking about. And then I will have rook d2 next, and my rook is at least becoming very active, and I thought I should have enough compensation here. I've also checked this earlier in the analysis. This seemed to be on point, what I was looking at here. So therefore he went knight e7, bringing the knight to c6. This pawn on a5 is just horrific in this endgame. Just always weak. Knight d2, knight c5. Knight e3, rook b5, going after this pawn on a5. And here I went rook a3, which is probably not necessary. I was quite happy with the move because the idea was after knight b7 that I'm going to have knight b3. Now the knight is protected and therefore the pawn as well. But it seems like I can even go for something like king e2, for example, and if knight b7, black is actually not really threatening to take this, because I can always move the knight, and then he's sort of stuck here. I will have ideas with knight d5, and whenever the knight moves, then I can take on a6. I saw similar ideas, but I was simply a bit hesitant here to give up some material. So I went rook a3, he brought the king. I also brought my king. I wanted it to get to c2 so that all of those entry squares are protected here. King e6, rook a1, and yeah, rook b8, knight e3, hinting at knight d5, so he went knight e7. Rook f1, and the idea behind rook f1 was actually not really to play f4. The idea was rather to give him something to think about, which did not really work. He played rook b5 immediately. I don't think that f4 is anyway such a serious idea. Like, even if you make some move like this seemed rather risky to go for this and open the g file up. But as it happened in the game, actually the rook turned out to be very useful in the f file. He repeated once and then he went f5. By the way, I think earlier I wanted to say something more. I don't think that this was the best try for him to play for something. I generally feel like g5 might be a little bit wrong. If he wants to play for more, I think he should go king e6 and then g6 f5. When I'm still under considerable pressure here. I don't know if I go f4, but it seems wrong. I would probably go king d1, king c2 here as well. But he did not go for that. He went f5 here, and after that I was quite happy because now some material is at least getting off the board, which makes my defensive task a bit easier. I took on f5 and then went g4, which seems like quite a simple solution. Probably something else should also be fine. I was just a little bit worried that he would get something like this and then maybe knight d3 or king e5, king d5, rook f8, putting pressure on f2. And g4 seemed like a nice forcing solution. He took on e3, and now, as you can see, my rook on f1 is actually doing something. So that was kind of lucky here that I had it placed it to f1 earlier. He could also take on g4 immediately. I guess I can also take here, but I would actually rather take with the knight on g4 because here he does not need to transpose to the game. He can move with the knight as well and doesn't need to take. But I like knight g4 because now for the first time in the game basically I have some target which I can go after, which is opponent e5. But he went for this, he traded, took on g4, rook h8, and now rook f5, and I'm just in time to have enough counter chances against both e5 and g5. And here he actually went for the repetition and we made a draw at this point. I still thought that he could try something with, for example, rook g2. I was looking at knight f3, knight d3, rook takes g5. This is the analysis I was talking in the previous video, which recorded earlier. King d5, and now I thought knight d2 is possible, but I didn't like the fact that he can take with the rook. Now I would probably need to go away with the rook, which should still be fine, but I was just worried about this endgame. If he takes here, then this a5 pawn will always be weak. Also, this should be a draw, objectively speaking, but it's going to be quite not as easy. But I thought that here rook g7 is a nice move. Even though I'm thinking now, what happens after king e4? Well, maybe I can just go for something like this and then pick up c7, and at some moment I could even take on e5, and then it's probably going to be knight rook versus rook at the very least. It's probably not even necessary to go for that. But this is how the game concluded. I'm just thinking if there was anything which I forgot to point out from the previous analysis. I think we stopped somewhere around here, but I think that was basically everything which was important to point out. So yeah, I'm very happy with this defense. I think also yesterday and today, even in the first game of the tournament, of course, some luck is involved while defending bad positions in many cases, especially if they're lost, like yesterday and in the first game. But overall, like for example today, I was under a lot of pressure, but I really feel like I put up a great resistance. Like also in the middle game, he was starting to attack me, and I found some good defensive moves. So this is something I'm quite happy about. So what happens now? We are going to play a tiebreak tomorrow, myself against my opponent Yangyi. I drew the white colors for the first game. We did that immediately after the game. The arbiters came there and we sorted that out. So I'm gonna have the white pieces in the first game, and I'm really excited for it. It's actually not my first tiebreak. In my previous World Cup, I got knocked out in the tiebreak of the first round against Greek Grandmaster Dimitrios Master-Vasilis in the second portion of the tiebreak. So I have at least some experience in that. I'm not entirely sure yet how I'm gonna prepare for it. I guess I'm gonna have a look at some openings, but I think the most important thing is to finally get some good sleep, because today was probably the worst day I've had so far regarding sleep. I cannot even blame the jet lag at this point anymore, because I've been here for almost a week. But it's simply the fact that I do feel the pressure to some extent. I know that in previous videos I've said that the pressure is on my opponents, which is true to some extent. I mean, they have, of course, bigger expectations from the event than I do. I mean, Yangyi probably wants to go until at least a couple more rounds further, because he's one of the top seeds in the event. But still, I just want to perform well in this tournament. You don't get the chance to play here so often. I'm very, very grateful that I've already had this chance to play twice in the World Cup. But you never know when it's going to be the next chance to play there. So I want to perform well. I want to show everything I got, and therefore I do have this feeling that I might put myself under some pressure. And I think this is the thing which really affects my sleep to some extent as well. Not necessarily the jet lag at this point anymore, even though it might even have a small impact still at this point. But yeah, I think I should get some dinner now. It's already 9 p.m. It was another pretty long game, and of course quite exhausting for me to defend some ugly position like this once again. So that was it for today. Thank you so much, guys, for your encouragement in the comments. It really means a lot to me. I read basically all of them. I also try to reply to as many of them as I can, and it's great to see the support, that you appreciate the videos, the recaps of this event, and that you always wish me well for the games. That's really nice of you, and I'm really grateful for that. So that was it for today. I hope the sound worked well now, and I'm gonna see you guys tomorrow after the tiebreak. The games start at 3 p.m. Indian time. There's a 15-minute delay. That is gonna be 10:30 Central European time in the morning, in case you're watching from Europe. Thank you, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.